Good evening. Call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Inform the public we are returning from an executive session. This meeting is being recorded live by Ray Cam. The pledge, Ms. Riley.
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The minutes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve first the minutes of the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Government Study Committee on February 5th.
Okay, I can vote on that.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
That's approved.
And make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular Selectmen's meeting of March 3rd, 2020.
I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
With one abstention. All right. Department heads, our fire chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The monthly report for the fire department. We had 80 calls for fire incidents, 183 ambulance calls, and then 77 inspectional service calls. No mutual aid given in any realm. And we did have a firefighter graduate from the fire academy on February 14th. And if it's okay with the board, I'd like to bring Cody in next month so you can
Sure.
put a name to the face of the name.
Sure. Absolutely.
Have his family come in and get his ring.
Yep, definitely.
That's all I have.
All right. Any questions for the chief?
No,
No?
No, thank you, Chief.
Thanks, chief.
we had an easy month.
Not
Every so often, thank God, huh?
I think that's the first time I've ever seen all zeros.
I know, that's what I'm looking at saying, wait a minute, is this a mistake?
Yeah.
Well, if you look, actually, if you look down, it says last year we were at
Yes,
459.
an increase.
Yeah.
489.
I think that's a sign of good leadership.
Thanks, Chris.
Appointments, we have one, the recommendation of Catherine Hanford for associate member of the COA. It's been recommended. What's the board's pleasure?
Move to accept.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
That is approved. No other appointments. Citizen and community input? No. Okay. No public hearings, new business. The proposed annual town meeting warrants. These are two articles that I've drawn up, and here's a copy for each of you that I'm proposing. These are consistent with some of the things that we've discussed in the past. The first is establishing a fee of $45 levied on a licensed owner for any hearing where the police department has to serve the order. As the board's aware, we've had to use that tool numerous times recently because the owners defaulted on our original order. This isn't meant to be a moneymaker, but to offset the cost of the police officer. And then the second one has been a thorn in my side for the past 13 years. We continue to have car dealerships offloading vehicles on Route 44. Mass Highway put up signs making it criminal to park there, but the issue continues to be that these are third-party vendors, and there's not a ton of incentive for the dealership to enforce it. This proposal would allow the town to issue a fine on their license within the town for violations. First offense would be $100, $250 for second and subsequent offenses. It's always been my belief that if the dealerships were proactive and refused deliveries of people who are trying to offload on 44, that the carrying companies would actually stop doing it. But that has yet to happen. There's been accidents as a result of it. There's been 44 completely shut down on multiple occasions as a result of it. And in my estimation, this has to stop. And so these are two proposals for the board. It's your pleasure, and if you are comfortable voting on them tonight, or if you want to put them on for a later meeting.
No, I'm comfortable voting because I agree with it.
And I'll second.
Oh, that is marvelous. I appreciate that.
How about that?
I know.
agreed with you.
I know. Jeez.
Watch out.
All in favor?
Bomb's coming.
All right. That's unanimous. Graham, these are two articles put on town meeting warrant. Thank you. Any new business, Mrs. Smith?
No, sir.
Ms. Riley?
No.
All right. Old business, continued final recommendation of Government Study Committee. The board received a presentation from Chairman Donahue last week relative to recommendations by the committee, numerous recommendations. I believe there were 8 total on essentially modifications to how we operate as a government. Mrs. Smith, you weren't here last week, so this is on the agenda for some discussion. I will say my personal recommendation would be that we have some discussion, but I myself could use some additional time. I'd like to have some conversations with people. In particular, as I understand it, at minimum, Conservation Commission was not consulted on this, and there's some impact potentially to them. I think there's some stakeholders out there. The Government Study Committee did a phenomenal job, and they spent a good year having conversations, but those aren't conversations that I had. I was very hands-off in the process and felt Government Study needed to do the work that they were designated. Okay. Well, when it comes to me, I just have to go.
I know, but you blurted out. I can't even understand you.
Government Study Committee did their process. There was no interference from me, but as a result of there being no interference, I wasn't able to have any conversations with anybody. And so until I can fully digest it, my recommendation and request of the board would be that we take a little additional time before we act on any of the recommendations.
Well, we have plenty of time.
We do, absolutely, and I think a year-long process shouldn't be rushed, especially where, in my estimation, a vast majority of these is going to significantly alter the way government is done in Rainham.
Well, there
Mr. Chair.
were some of them that were very cut and dry.
Correct.
Do you want to discuss any of them, or you want to just hold the whole thing?
I'm fine discussing any of them. What I'm requesting is that we don't take action on them tonight.
Yeah, okay.
I would like to see at least 3 go as articles to the annual town meeting. I think we have until the end of this month to act on that, but I would just say that I would like to see an article to go to the town meeting for the town to assume the operational responsibilities of the Rainham Public Library. I think we've had a couple of presentations, well, certainly at the joint meeting, and the library director, Eden Ferguson, gave quite an in-depth presentation about that. So I would like to see that go to the town meeting and let the voters decide on that. And I also would like to see an article drawn up to go to town meeting to again ask the voters to decide on a 5-member board of selectmen. Many reasons that were pointed out by our government study committee. I think it's something that needs to be considered. I think probably the most convincing argument for it is that if we have one person who is out sick or away on business and the other person can't attend the meeting, we can't take action. If we have one person who is sick and the other 2 people don't agree, then nothing happens as well. With a 5-member board, we can have subcommittees that can work between meetings and focus on certain areas or certain projects, and I think we could accomplish more. I think our hands are tied as far as making progress to some extent. You know, it's very difficult where we can't discuss these things outside of the meeting, which open meeting, obviously we want to do that, but there are times in emergency situations and so forth where to be able to communicate one member to another could be important. So that, and the third one that I think I would be ready to go forward with is an article to provide the funding for a company, a provider, to do a code and bylaw codification project. I think after the annual town meeting in 2018, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that updating the bylaws was something that's really important. I think we've seen a couple instances where there's been some confusion. So I think that's very important. So I'm generally supportive of most of the other items that are proposed, recommendations, but I think those 3 I would be ready whenever you are to send that forward to annual town meeting for the voters to decide.
Can I ask Ms. Riley, do you think it's imperative that let me go back for a minute. The bylaw one I have no objection to because I don't see any adverse impact to anybody. The rest, to me, I think it can be argued, can have an adverse impact on a population, whether people support them or not. So I wouldn't object to the bylaw one moving forward, but do you see an imperative need to move forward in May on stuff that is, again, in my opinion, going to completely and drastically change how we operate as a government in Rainham? We just got these last week. They were flushed out over a year-long process. I can't speak to any input or discussions you had, and I'm not saying that you had any. I'm just saying I had none. So when we got them last week, that was my first opportunity to digest what was coming forward and hear any input on it.
Mr. Chairman, we did have that joint government study committee
on the library.
February 5th.
Correct, but that was exclusive to that.
Yes.
And at that point, no recommendation had been made. They were still in a determination phase. So
the library director made a very strong recommendation.
Correct.
However.
But,
Yes.
there's...
Yes. If I could just say, what do you see as the negative impact to a 5-member Board of Selectmen?
A lot of things, and I'm not saying I'm against it yet, but I will remind the board that town meeting did vote it down in the past.
That was
Several years ago.
Correct, absolutely, but the town has spoken once before on it. On top of that, I think we all, when we run for these seats, recognize the time commitment that's needed. In 13 years, I've not missed a meeting. I've come in after surgery, I've come in sick, and I think when you run for this board, you make a commitment to be here every week, and that's, to me, a matter of what it is. Every 3 years when I decide to run, I know that I have to be here every Tuesday, and I think anybody who runs for the seat has to have that expectation, and if you don't, then I don't think you're ready to serve.
There's no reason why those 5 people don't have to have that same commitment.
No, absolutely not. But I would also say, look at how challenging we have of a time recruiting candidates. You'd be adding 2 seats to the executive authority where potentially, I'm not saying it could happen, but potentially could, you don't get a candidate. There was a town, I believe, on the Vineyard that they couldn't get somebody to fill a selectman seat. They had writing candidates deny accepting the position. And so there's a lot of opposites to it. In addition, neighboring communities that went to 5 imploded, absolutely imploded. They said it was inefficient and ineffective, and they switched to a city form of government. So I think the board needs to do some due diligence on our own. While we can take the Government Study Committee's recommendations, there are a lot of organizations out there that we can have conversations with, including our sister community of Bridgewater, who went from 3 to 5 and had significant issues. And I'm just saying, I think we as a board should do our due diligence before we just blindly take recommendations. Because to me, having 1 week to digest this is not sufficient. And I'm not saying all of them can't go to town meeting. I'm just saying I don't understand why it has to be May. We've slow-walked a lot of different stuff. We've taken 2 weeks to approve minutes. We're really going to take 1 week to approve the entire face of government changing?
My gosh, I don't see it as the entire face of government changing. It's still a Board of Selectmen.
That's my opinion, Ms. Riley. You're entitled to yours, and I have mine. So.
And if it doesn't go to annual town meeting, then you're waiting an entire year again.
Absolutely.
For it to be considered.
Well, that's why I asked you.
Time to get it on board. There's
Yes.
plenty of time to get it on there.
For March 31st, right?
I'm not saying you can bring it up whenever you want. At this point tonight, I'm not outside of the bylaw thing because I've heard no opposition, and I think it only enhances the way we do
Have
government.
you heard opposition in the 5?
Oh, absolutely. No question.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, again, I wasn't around for it, but the 2 of you were. People voted this article down in the past. There are definitely people who are fundamentally and philosophically opposed to it. You're going to tell me that you expect this
That
to go
was
to...
15 years ago, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, but you're telling me that there's nobody in town opposed to it.
No, I did not say that.
You don't
Let the
know that until you
voters
bring it up to
decide.
the-
And I'm not saying they can't, Miss Riley. I'm saying I'm asking for a little bit more time to do my due diligence. That's what I'm asking for.
We have, 2 weeks to
The
March
31st is the
March
deadline.
31st. So you got 2 weeks to do. You do. Do it.
I wasn't going to ask for a motion tonight, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
You asked for discussion.
Yeah,
That's my discussion. Those 3, I would be ready to go forward with to town meeting and let the voters, who are the legislative body,
Make
make
their
a
decision.
decision. We can discuss the pros and cons at that point.
Absolutely. I'm just saying before we vote for anything, I'm just asking for a little bit more time. That's
Sure, no
my
problem.
request.
Okay.
Any others that you want to discuss or that you're leaning toward beside
The
the
bylaw
bylaws?
one I think is phenomenal. I think it's past due,
That's something
obviously.
we have to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was delighted to see that my request from 2 years ago for a finance person was recommended. The rest I don't have the familiarity with to give an opinion on right now because I want to digest it more.
Well, I digested 2 or 3 of them, and I don't agree with them.
And that's the thing, absolutely.
That's the whole idea of doing this.
Absolutely. And again, I just want to do my due diligence. I had no input during this process. I hadn't talked to people because I wanted to be hands-off so nobody could say I was trying to steer a conversation one direction or another.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, I attended a few meetings, but I did not try to sway the...
Ms. Riley, I'm not at all
committee one way or
implying that you
another.
were. I'm just saying that from my standpoint, I wasn't involved in it. I'm not, and I said this at the outset, I'm not implying that you had any input or tried to steer it. That never came out of my mouth. What I'm saying is I had no input, no knowledge of it. So,
We
Well, I
all
don't think
voted for the
anybody
government
did,
study
because-
committee.
Ms. Riley, I'm not saying that either.
Right.
I'm just saying the product that they produced was just given to us last week.
Yes.
That was my first time seeing it. That is all I'm saying. There's no implication to you whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. You have my assurance of that. So I don't know if there's something else you need me to say to make that clearer, but I'm just saying I need time to process this.
Could you just, under discussion, Mr. Chairman, explain a little bit about what you see as the financial person?
Absolutely.
Are you looking at a full-time person?
I am
or-
looking at a full-time position, and I think, as I've discussed in the past, it's somebody who's going to do budget projections, which hasn't been done since Randy was here. It's going to do month-to-month, which most successful enterprises do, revenue over expenses. It's going to be liaising with the state government, because Chapter 90 and Chapter 70 funds come from the state, and right now we just toss a number out there based upon a percent of last year's, but a lot of communities liaise with your local legislative delegation and get a handle on what House 1, House 2, Senate Ways and Means, House Ways and Means, and Conference Committee are doing. That's something I used to do when I worked at the State House. I don't work there anymore, so I don't have the time to have those conversations, but we should have somebody in regular contact with our legislative offices and the governor's office on that, working with DOR to further enhance our best practices relative to financial management, working with our independent auditing firm to make sure they have everything they need to get the audit done, liaising as a staff assistant to the Finance Committee, because keep in mind, those are unpaid volunteer people who are putting together a $41 million budget every year.
And doing a good job.
Absolutely, and I was just going to say that while they do a phenomenal job, that is an insurmountable job to do as a volunteer unpaid position on nights and weekends, and that's
All right.
what it comes to.
In discussing this just with people,
Yeah.
I think there's a way to do something like that without going outside and hiring somebody.
There could be. My personal opinion was, and I've expressed this before, that to me this is that important of a position that these should be the primary and sole duties. I think when you start interchanging it with other stuff, it waters it down. If you look in the past, I'd say 2 months, probably 5 or 6 more communities have posted for a position.
I don't care what other communities do, Joe.
Okay, well, I'm bringing in...
I know what you're doing, and I understand completely how you feel about it. I don't feel it is a necessary thing at this point in time.
That's fine. I'm just answering Ms. Riley's question. So,
And I'm not arguing with you yet.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
if I may, sorry to
Well, you're going to
interrupt the lively conversation.
Discussion.
Because,
Yeah.
because March 31st is the deadline, make a recommendation to the board to maybe pick 1 or 2 items that you'd like to discuss over the next few meetings. And in order, if there are topics that you want to try to push forward as a body to get onto the warrant.
Well, I think picking them right now, unless we all picked our own, would be presumptive, because I don't know where Mrs. Smith is. I don't know. Miss Riley just told us where she is,
Right.
and I've let my position known that I need more time to digest most of the recommendations. So tonight we'd just be shooting from the hip.
Well, you digest as fast as you talk, so therefore I don't think you're going to have too much problem digesting it for the next 2 weeks. So therefore, I think we can just move on and give you your 2
Thank
weeks.
you.
And I think Miss Riley probably is all set with hers, and I'm sure it's all set with mine.
That's phenomenal. I appreciate
we're
that. Wonderful.
So do we want to put it on the agenda for 2 weeks
I
for
have no
further
objection to that.
discussion and possible action?
Please, Graham.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the gravel removal permit, 1634 New State Highway, Rosa Chew. Graham, do we have a final recommendation from the building commissioner?
Yes, it should be included with the packets. These right.
So he wants us to approve with these conditions?
Approve with those conditions.
Okay, so the conditions for approval are a 20-foot stone tracking pad must be installed before any work starts. All stumps must be removed from the site. Grading must not impact roadway drainage or abutting property. Proper dust control measures must be implemented. Siltation controls must be in place before work starts. There shall be no activity between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. There shall be no activity on Sundays. Roadways shall be cleaned and maintained daily. What is the board's pleasure?
I would move to grant it,
Contingent upon those conditions?
contingent upon the recommendations of the building department.
Okay.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
It's been approved with those conditions. Thank you.
You have a copy of the conditions? You have a copy of the conditions?
Oh, the ones you just...
Yes.
Yes.
May I go? Sure.
Yes, please.
Oh.
thank you so much for approving the gravel removal permit. It has been a labor of love for the last 13 years. And you were mentioning the conditions. Will those be spelled out when the gravel permit is issued?
We can make sure that in the correspondence it's included.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was read so fast I
Sure.
couldn't take any notes, so I appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you for cleaning up that corner.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Bob will take care.
All right, thank you. Next up is the employee evaluation form. It's been discussed for the past 2 weeks. The consensus last week was to approve it as it was presented with the additional addendum that Ms. Riley proposed last week.
I've slightly revised the addendum, too, because I was including the selectmen's goals, and I think that perhaps that's not fair. We should be judged, evaluated on those. Maybe the town administrator can evaluate us after we evaluate him, but it's basically the same. It's a little bit more formalized, so I'll pass that down.
Do you need one, Mrs. Smith?
I have one. Thank you, Joseph.
And it's basically for the audiences, the goals that our town administrator laid out, implementing a sound financial foundation, implementing a facilities maintenance plan. He was talking about a facilities position, assisting government study committee, assisting public safety building committee, addressing staff safety issues, addressing cybersecurity issues, resolving the middle school agreement, address personnel issues, install town hall carpet, and achieve MCPPO certification. These are ongoing, but I think it would be fair to, evaluate those since our goals are so important.
What's the board's pleasure?
That's just fine. This is the first time reading, obviously, the same as you. So
Smith, have you seen the rest of the packet? Because it's
no.
okay.
I gave it a few weeks back. It was pretty thick.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Yes, I have that at home. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Are you prepared to vote on it tonight, or do you need more time?
I really haven't gone over that whole thing.
The only thing I would say, too, Mr. Chairman, is we did say, I know I had mentioned that there were a few items that perhaps it's a little premature to judge, and you had said we could put down NA. Maybe it would be helpful if we could decide in advance what is not applicable so that we're all judging him on the same criteria.
The only concern I would have with that is I think all of us have different perspectives on it, and we've all had our independent conversations with him. So to me, I can't tell you off the bat which ones I would deem to be an A. And so I think the fairest way to do it would be for us to do our own individual evaluations that will be merged into one, and then we have the ability to converse about it and express our thoughts on why we did or did not give a rating in that particular category.
For me.
So motion
Can
then
we
to
do it for
table it
next
for
week?
next week, so
That's
Mrs.
fine.
Smith has a
Okay.
chance to review.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next is the continued discussion of the proposed facilities building maintenance position. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was discussed before the board 2 weeks ago. Mr. Chairman, I believe you asked for more information. There's some thought that the current custodian position covers some of the duties that are described. I would like to remind the board that this is not just a facilities position, but it's mainly a building inspector position with a facilities component added. Since the topic was last brought to the board, I've had additional conversation with Bob Iafredi. We've both agreed that if the position were to starting as a part-time position, would be best to integrate it into the town. We were thinking 24 hours or the equivalent of 3 full days per week at approximately $25 to $33 an hour. That would be approximately $41,000 a year, with benefits an additional $22,000, and then miscellaneous costs that are included of office supplies, training, and any other associated requirements of the department. So on an annual basis, that would be an additional cost of approximately just shy of $65,000. In looking at the custodian position that we have for Town Hall, the job description does not entail what the focus is for facilities maintenance and preventive maintenance and responsive maintenance. Is truly more of a custodian position. And if you give me 1 second. So currently the job description, and it's not to say the job description can't be updated, but that would take another discussion aspect. The distinguishing characteristics as defined by the job description. Well, I'll start out with how the position is defined. Under the supervision, the town administrator performs a variety of custodial duties to maintain the building and the surrounding grounds in a clean, orderly, and sanitary safe condition. Performs manual labor, including maintenance of building and grounds, and a variety of minor maintenance jobs and tasks. Takes responsibility for care and condition of town offices and Gilmore Hall. There is a sentence in there about performing minor appropriate vehicle maintenance work, and it's my understanding that the individual in the position had a discussion with the interim town administrator where that duty wouldn't be applied because the maintenance is taken care of by the highway department. Groundkeeping duties, cares of ground including grass mowing, raking leaves, hedge trimming, snow shoveling, litter patrol, weeding, trim painting, sweeping walkways, and other repair maintenance. And then custodial duties include emptying trash, vacuuming floors, cleaning and restocking the bathrooms, washing and waxing the floors, dusting blinds, washing walls, cleaning and changing filters in the air conditioning units, washing windows, painting, and other maintenance and repair duties as assigned by the town administrator. And the qualifications are 18 years of age, mass driver's license, high school diploma or equivalent, and a quarry determination. So really the custodian position that we currently have and the job itself does not cover sort of what the facilities portion of the new position would entail. And again, the facilities portion of the new position is just a minor portion. It's also to pick up for the building inspector when there's conflicts of interest and other stresses on the department.
You all set?
Yep.
Okay. Comments from the board?
Well, I agree with it. I said a couple of weeks ago that I thought the position was necessary. It helps downstairs in the building department, and it also would have helped a great deal if we had someone like that on board when the boiler broke at South School and when any work that had to be done over at North School. We could have anticipated it before any damage was done.
Ms. Riley?
I think from the perspective, obviously, we need to replace the part of the position that Mr. Iafredi, our building commissioner, had someone to fill in for him when he couldn't do an inspection. There's an awful lot of building that's still going on in town, and it's really important that we have someone keeping close eye on to make sure that everything's being constructed the way it should, that all of the zoning is in track. He wears, I think, about 6 different hats, also advises the planning board. I mean, I think you could very easily make an argument that he could certainly use an assistant. And as far as the building maintenance is concerned, we have a police and fire station, we have the council on aging, we have the park and rec building. We have a number of buildings that are town-owned, and I think keeping on top of maintenance with them can be cost-effective. Could we start the position, do you think, at 20 hours? Any consideration given to that, Mr. Waters? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
I believe that would be agreeable.
I thought that was what.
He said 24.
Oh, it's 24.
I'm being a stickler.
Right.
He is a book.
So 24 would be 3 full days.
3 full days.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I thought we were going to do 20 hours and have it start with that and see how it works out. But I know Gilmore Hall, our custodian really doesn't do anything at Gilmore Hall, because I can remember asking him quite a while ago to check on the blinds that were there. Someone had told me that the blinds were all broken and the drapes were atrocious. Well, this is a town building. If we don't start taking care of these things, what's going to happen to the building? Now, Gilmore Hall is one of the oldest buildings we have in town. That's our history. We don't have any history other than the buildings that we have. If we don't take care of them, they're going to disintegrate, and the town is going to have no history.
Riley, are you good, or do you have anything else to add?
I would make a motion that we, since it's a slightly different proposal at this point, modified, that we take it under consideration for 1 week.
For discussion, I'd like to add my comments.
Sure.
I continue to be opposed to the proposal, and one of the requests I've now made twice to the town administrator, which he continues to not do, is to prioritize positions. We have proposals from the Government Study Committee to create upwards of 3 positions. I've asked him twice now to prioritize and give me that. He has yet to do that, which I am quite concerned about, because A, it's a directive from me, but B, we can't be in the habit of spending $500,000 on positions, and that's what those positions would total if we bring them all in, between salary, wages, health, dental, and pension liability. So before we move forward with it, I'd like to actually get what I requested of the town administrator. In addition to that, I helped write that job description, and I think it's missing a couple things, because in it also said any duties assigned by the highway superintendent and any other duties assigned by the town administrator or board of selectmen. And a lot of the beginning of that position talked about maintenance, which is what this position would do. As I said, when Mr.
Can I
Lucy...
say something to you?
Yeah.
Joe, maintenance is maintenance is maintenance.
Correct.
What do you consider maintenance?
So what we're talking about is somebody going to these buildings and keep an eye on them and identifying not just present issues, but potential issues. This is something that he can do, because if you remember the proposal from 2 weeks ago, this job description had absolutely no requirements in it. It didn't require the construction super license that you asked for. It didn't require experience in carpentry, plumbing, HVAC, electrical. So tell me what the difference is between this person and what our existing staff person that we're already paying is in terms of skill set. So on top of that, you're talking over $60,000 in new money that can go to a host of different areas, whether it be new police, new fire, a school adjustment counselor. The school district's requesting, I believe, 3 or 4 of those. Those are all things that have a direct, tangible, positive benefit on our community. This doesn't. Gilmore Hall, it was my father who discovered there was a flood there and called me, and I had to call Gordon. What we did to take care of that is put in a couple $100 temperature gauge, so if the heat goes off, an alarm sounds, and we know to go there so pipes don't freeze. Everything this position seeks to accomplish can be done now or for minimal cost to the taxpayers of Rainham, allowing us to use our vital resources to address areas that are far more significant. And again, I would say, we're talking about an assistant town administrator, a human resource position, a financial analyst position. We're budgeting for 2 new firefighters, which would only be 4 over the past 20 years. School adjustment counselors. Those, to me, all take priority over this position. I already said Bob can fill the position of part-time inspector. That's needed, that's necessary. That's not $65,000. For us to go down a path and spend $65,000 when the town administrator still has not been able to produce the one thing I've asked him to produce is alarming to me. And I think the board has to be really aware when we move forward and spend taxpayer money. We have to be able to justify it. And I, in good conscience, can't justify it when we have somebody on staff who had been doing it, has no problem continuing to do it, and is able to do it.
Then if that be the case, then why did South School flood?
He wasn't asked to go there. South School flooded before Gordon took over. When Gordon came in, Gordon and I sat down.
What do you mean when Gordon took over?
When Gordon took over.
That's right.
Yeah.
South School flooded a year before that.
But he wasn't doing it then. He wasn't asked to. I just said when Gordon was here, Gordon had him doing it. That was something that we put in place when Gordon took over as interim town administrator. The custodian was never asked to do this before. That was an oversight that should have happened. When these issues flared up, Gordon and I put this in place, again, along with the temperature control.
Fine. When the South School boiler flooded, the town administrator's office was notified
Yeah.
and did nothing.
But that's not what we're debating here. He's no longer with us, and the person who I'm saying can do these functions wasn't in charge of those functions then.
Well, then he was just in charge of this building?
Correct. And the police station. That's all he was. But when I helped write that job description, and when I sat down and was part of the interview team, the expectation was, because I'll remind the board, we were going to go out to a contractor for cleaning services, and the input we got was to continue to have somebody on staff so they can do all of these functions.
And that's fine, and I'm not criticizing the job that he
No, he does a phenomenal job, and he's ready, willing, and able to continue to do these things. And I'll tell you right now, he maybe makes 35 grand. So we're trying to bring somebody in with the same qualifications as him, because that's how the posting was written, and pay him double for less hours.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
the posting isn't complete to begin with.
It isn't, and that's another concern I have, because 2 weeks ago I asked for a complete proposal, and I still don't have a complete proposal. I don't know what it takes for me to request something and actually get it.
You requested it.
I requested a complete proposal, and I also requested he prioritize the proposed new positions, and I don't have either.
Oh, well, I don't know about that because I didn't request it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, without violating the open meeting law and having the individual here, to keep it to the position and the job description. The job description, I reviewed the job description, and the current job description that I read off is the current job description that the position entails. Anything more complicated, any more complicated tasks, we'd have to reevaluate our personnel matters, our personnel staffing. So a lot of the things that are entailed with preventive maintenance, even to go as far as the HVA system in this building is computer controlled, and to have right now, Debbie and I are trying to obtain control of that so we can monitor it. But that's just one example. When we have the new public safety facility come on board, that will be a computer controlled environmental system, as they call it now. I would also say that under the previous town administrator, there was a building environmental study that was done that found mold within the ducts, and that's an example of lacking building maintenance, preventive maintenance. And I don't disagree with a lot of your arguments or points, excuse me. But I think I wouldn't propose this if I didn't see a need for it, and I will take a look at the prioritization and
does his position or does it not say building maintenance, and does his position or does it not say other assigned tasks?
So the job, correct, and the job says custodian in the title, custodian / groundskeeper, and it's of October 2017, and the other assigned tasks that has to be within something within reason. It can't be other tasks that take up a majority of his time. And if you assign this position, those other tasks that would take up a majority of the time. Additionally, this position also takes care of the trash and recycling of the police department, as well as I believe the lawn mowing for the police department.
And so, as I discussed, though, when I requested a proposal, would it have not been prudent to have a discussion with him to see what his comfort level was, okay, and maybe potentially increasing his hours to 40 hours a week, which would cost the town and taxpayers $2,000 to $3,000. When I talk about flushing a proposal and giving us a complete one, I talk about looking at all angles, and I'll give you an example. My functional title is assistant director, but do you know what I had to do 2 weeks ago? I had to clean up a child's vomit in my waiting area because I didn't have staff to do it. So when your job description says other duties as assigned, it can be pretty wide.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, and I have had conversations with the individual who's in the position, and so I do know the limitations of their capacity, and it cannot fulfill the needs that we have. And I understand other duties as assigned can include things that are not relevant to the job, but that may need to be done. And those are when the time comes, those are done not only by this position but other positions in town hall as well, and I'd say townwide. This town, not to get too much off topic, but town staff in general has the wherewithal to step up when needed.
What's the board's pleasure?
I'll make a motion since we want to prioritize positions. The Government Study Committee recommended 3. Mr. Waters is proposing another one, that we put it on the agenda, either, Mr. Chairman, for 1 or 2 weeks to discuss it. And I will just mention, because I don't want the taxpayers thinking that we're willy-nilly spending money, I'm not sure of the exact statistics, but someone pointed out to me that I believe in since 2009, which is 11 years ago, the tax base of the town has doubled, and in that time we've added 4 new positions. So you've done a good job, Mr. Chairman, and other selectmen, to be very fiscally conservative, but there is a time when you really need to bite the bullet, because it's being penny-wise and pound-foolish sometimes not to get what you really need, whether that's a finance person, an HR person, facilities person, what have you. So if we could table that for further
Absolutely, I agree, and I would just say I don't disagree with the penny-wise and pound-foolish, but I like to put my pennies in places that matter the most. There was also a study that came out a few weeks ago about car insurance rates, and one of the reasons why Rainham has such low car insurance rates is because our crime rate is low, and our crime rate is low because of our police department. So if we have the $60,000 just sitting around, let's hire a new police officer instead of a facilities position that I maintain is not necessary, because it has a direct positive impact on the community. Our public safety is what brings people to Rainham to live here, and it's what brings our businesses to come here and subsidizes our operations. So I don't mind spending money when it's appropriate and necessary. I don't think this position is appropriate or necessary. I think more police officers, more firefighters, school adjustment counselors, those are appropriate and necessary.
I don't disagree with you. They are necessary. But I think maintaining the buildings that the people come in and out of every day is also necessary.
Let's be clear, though. This position would not maintain buildings. This position is supposed to put together plans and identify issues. This position did not call for any advanced licensure or certification. This position, as it was proposed to us 2 weeks ago, and nothing has been given to us since, required absolutely nothing. Bob on the corner could apply and get the job based upon how the proposal was written. And I will again remind the board, I asked for a revised, complete proposal, and we have yet to receive one. So that's the concerns that I have, as we continue to get this information in piecemeal, not complete, and now we're seeing it's going to be $65,000. But again, there's no HVAC requirement, there's no electrical requirement, there's no plumbing requirement, there's no carpentry requirement, there's no engineering requirement, there's no requirement for anything other than this person having a pulse and being able to cash a check.
Mr. Chairman, I made a motion to table.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any other old business, Mrs. Smith?
I have nothing.
Miss Riley?
No, thank you.
Okay. Town Administrator's report.
Mr. Chairman, when was that item tabled to?
2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I would strongly advise you follow the directives I've given you in terms of giving us a complete proposal and also prioritizing jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town Administrator's report for March 10th, 2020. Ongoing projects include the recent town and school staff meeting regarding this coronavirus, which took place yesterday, Monday, March 9th, to discuss the town's response and share ideas and resources. Today, just for FYI for the board and the audience, the governor declared a state of emergency, giving the administration more flexibility to respond to the outbreak and seek federal assistance where available. The Council of Aging siting project has been amended, which means that it's being pushed back. The deadline for submittals are 1 week, Wednesday, March 18th at 9 a.m. This amendment has to do with additional work that was discovered that needed to be included in the bid request. Department head contracts. I'll be sending a memo out shortly to department heads for the renewal of contracts. My understanding from Gordon is that this year the board wanted the town administrator to negotiate the contracts and then bring final recommendations to the board instead of having each department head submit a request to the board directly. I don't know if the board would like to comment on the process or add it to a future agenda for discussion. Master Plan 2021. The Planning Board met with Serped and would like to have a separate Master Plan Committee. If there's no objection, I can add this item to the March 17th agenda. And Bob Iafredi can come present what the Planning Board discussed with Serped's recommendations to make on the makeup of a committee. Upcoming, the next regularly scheduled Selectmen's meeting will be Tuesday, March 17th at 7 p.m. in the Don McKinnon Meeting Room of Town Hall. The department head meeting is March 26th at 10 a.m. and right here in Town Hall. There's a special town meeting on March 31st at 6:30 p.m. to vote on the special town warrant. The Springtown meeting is coming up. Warrant articles are due March 31st. The annual financial town meeting is Monday, May 18th.
Thank you. Any questions for the administrator?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to give two special kudos to the town clerk's office for all their hard work on the early election and early voting, in addition to our health agent and how he has communicated with me and the other department heads on the COVID-19 information.
Good. Thank you. Selectmen's report, Mrs. Smith.
I have nothing.
Okay. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Ms. Riley.
Yes, I attended that meeting on Monday that our health agent, Mr. Tanis, had, and our representative from the police chief was there, our fire chief was there, superintendent and assistant superintendent and facilities person for the district was there, in addition to our town administrator and executive assistant, and just assure everybody that there's good communication in town between the different departments. Our school department is taking every effort to make sure our schools are as clean as possible. They've got all the supplies on hand that they need, and although there's not a lot of information forthcoming as far as the virus is concerned, that the town is doing everything that we can to make sure that we try to keep our citizenry safe. And along that line, while we're talking about spending money, I would ask the board to consider our CERT team leader, where we would want to consider a small stipend for his services. I think one thing that I was thinking after this meeting is that there seem to be so many possibilities for emergency situations, whether it's a tornado, a hurricane, a snowstorm, something like this that we've never experienced before, a gas leak, where certainly to have trained volunteers that are available and someone who can contact them at a moment's notice and they can assist the fire, the police department, or our town hall, I think is critically important. And that person is totally volunteer at this point. I think he's spoken to you about it before,
Yeah, I had
Mr.
proposed it
Chairman.
about a year ago,
Yeah.
and it never got any support. So
Right. So I don't know if we want to formalize that, if it needs to be an article, or whether it would come into the fire department since it's emergency management.
I think what we would want to do is, I had conversations prior to proposing it with the former chief. I think the new chief should have an opportunity to
Absolutely.
evaluate his department and see if the role fits in and how it fits in with the job, because it has to be a job description, looks like. There would have to be a posting and interviews, but not to put the chief on the spot. I support the position in theory, but I think we should give the chief a little time to...
Absolutely. And so maybe just to make a motion to refer that to our fire chief.
Sure.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the only other thing I have, again, school department, you referenced the public hearing on the budget is tomorrow night, Wednesday at 7 o'clock at the high school. Some good news coming from our high school. They had a very successful robotics meet this past weekend, and the Lady Trojans have won the Division I South final basketball game. They were supposed to play tonight at the TD Garden. I assume that that's still on, even with the statewide state of emergency. And a great article in our Enterprise about our Rainham Veterans Agent and her service dog Rabbit. So kudos to the reporter who wrote that, and to Michaela for being back on job full time. That's all I have.
Thank you. I would just echo the comments complimenting our town clerk on early voting. I know it's continued to be a challenge, not just for her, but smaller localities throughout the Commonwealth, in part because of the costs associated with it, but in part because of staffing it. But in speaking with some of the people, and there were about 400 who took advantage of it, they felt that the process was seamless, really easy, I think was the quote I got from a couple different people. And I read an article last night that it was one of the biggest turnouts in state history, and it was the biggest turnout on the Democratic side in state history. And so I think anything that we can do to continue to engage people and get them out to vote is a positive for society. But a lot of credit goes to Marsha and her staff for executing it, because it could have happened and it could have been a disaster. And had it not been for her and her expertise, we wouldn't be where we are now. So
I would just add, Mr. Chairman, too, there was a lot of public information
Yes.
beforehand. We had the sign up in front of
Yes.
the police and fire station, so it was well publicized.
Yep, absolutely. We handled all the correspondence. There's no press time, no emergency business. What is the board's pleasure?
Did you take care of that?
Yeah, we already did, under appointments. Oh, no, this? Yeah, we did this last week.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. It was in my box. I
Yeah,
didn't realize.
yeah, no, that was done last week.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn, sign the bills and warrants with no business to be conducted afterward.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are
Thank you
adjourned.
all.